The first recorded sighting of the rare Omura's whale in Sri Lanka's waters is also the first form of the central northern Indian Ocean. We have with us Dr.Asha de Vos, who had this extraordinary first sighting. Good afternoon and welcome. Dr. de Vos, what is the significance of this?
So I would say that this sighting is significant on multiple levels. First of all, from a personal perspective, I'd say it's significant because who doesn't want to push the boundaries of science for the sake of their own country? Secondly, as Sri Lankans, I mean, this is incredible. We get to add another whale to our list. It reminds us that we live in one of this teeming ocean basin, probably the most understudied ocean basin in the world, and there is still so much to find out. And on an international level, this species was only described back in 2003, which is very recent. Yeah. And, you know, every piece of information we find out about it is like another piece of a jigsaw. So now, based on this, you know, in the past, we've known that they've been in the South Atlantic, the Eastern Pacific, and in the Eastern Indian Ocean and the Western Indian Ocean, but nothing about what goes on in between. So scientists believe that this population was actually broken up and there were just two separate populations. But now, with this sighting in the central northern Indian Ocean, we think, well, maybe it's all connected. Maybe they're just moving around the area. So little bits of information, big news.
This is not a daily occurrence. You don't get to see these kind of things every day. How excited were you? What did you feel?
So personally, I was extremely excited once I realized what it was. So to be fair,
did you know what it was when you?
No. So one of the things we do when we do our research is that we take photographs of whales, particular characteristic markings, so that we can photo identify them. We can re-identify individuals based on these markings, and we have catalogs for all the big species in our waters. And so I was basically doing routine field work, collecting these images. We had the boat switched off. This whale came round, was circulating. We took all these photographs, and I was thinking it looked a bit unusual. But then when we went back to the field center and my students were kind of cataloging the photographs, we realized this was something very different. And then I started to see the very characteristic markings. So generally, you know, if you look at a Bridie's whale, which is very commonly seen in Sri Lankan waters, it's a small-sized whale. And sometimes people confuse Bridie's whales for this particular species. Bridie's whales are completely black. So they have no real markings on their bodies and stuff. Whereas this Omura's whale, incredible. It's really beautiful because it's got a very light underjaw on the right side, but on the left side it's black. On its back, it's got these beautiful patterns that are very characteristic of this species. So there's a lot of different characteristics we started to find, and of course at that point it was incredibly exciting. The sighting was in February, but then it had to go through scientific verification, publications, before we could actually tell the world. And so the news is hot off the press right now, which is great. It was terribly hard to keep a secret, but I'm so glad that we can now share it with Sri Lankans and the world.
Recently, we witnessed a very unusual activities in the northeast. Stranded whales. What did you think was the reason?
So, stranded whales is a very tricky subject. One of the things is that pilot whales, which is the species that's stranded, tend to be a species that has a tendency to strand. Say in New Zealand and in Western Australia, there are lots of records of pilot whale stranding. And now, one of the trickiest things about stranding is you can't test it. You can't see what caused it because then you're probably going to kill these whales, right? So we have theories as scientists. One of the main theories is these are essentially, you know, pilot whales are large dolphins. They are very social. They move around in large groups. And if one animal is not feeling well or feeling disorientated and goes too close to shore, maybe following some fish even, they can get pushed onto shore, and because they are in these tight groups, the whole family follows. And that, you know, that's one of the explanations we have. In some parts of the world, stranding events happen for different species like beaked whales as a result of Navy sonar. But out here, I was in Sampur the week afterwards. I spoke to the Navy guys who did an incredible job at saving all the whales. And, you know, I talked to them about whether there was a possibility of any sonar activities, and they said no. So we can rule that out. It's probably something natural, old age, disease, we never know. But I have to say, at this point, we really do have to congratulate the Navy. It's the first time it's happened in Sri Lanka, and they reacted amazingly well to get the animals back in the water and save all of them.
What sort of threats do they face?
So if we look at whales in general in Sri Lankan waters, the biggest threat for, say, the blue whale, which is our iconic species, is ship strike. They get hit by ships and they get killed. Apart from that, however, we do see problems with entanglement. So now the Omura's whale that we documented, on the top left of its jaw, of its mouth, you can see an entanglement scar. And this tells us also, it gives us a piece of information about the threats that they face in these waters. Now, we know that Omuras do get entangled in fishing nets of, say, Thailand, but now we know it's also a problem in our waters. So something for us to really consider and think a bit about.
We were talking about the stranded whales. Now, we recently also witnessed a large number of dead fish in the same part of the island. Is there any connection, or...?
No, it just happens to be coincidence. There are lots of different reasons for dead fish. I know Nara has done some work on the reasons. Largely, it's basically changes in the water. Algal blooms, algae tend to photosynthesize because they're plants. They suck up a lot of the oxygen, and as they grow, so as a result, you have a decrease in oxygen, and the fish therefore can't survive. So that's really one of the big problems, one of the reasons. And fish kills do happen around the island from time to time. Sometimes, however, we do see large masses of dead fish on beaches in Sri Lanka. In many cases, that's not a natural cause. That's because of dynamite fishing that happens in our oceans. So there's lots of different reasons, but these two incidences, I would say, are probably not related in any way.
Where exactly did you see the Omura's whale?
So I do most of my fieldwork off Mirissa, and I mean, it was incredible because we were only 7 kilometers offshore, which is very close, in water that was 55 to 65 meters deep. And one of the things we're learning about these whales is they tend to be species that like shallow shelf waters, and this confirms that. So it's actually an area that a lot of people are using, and so it just goes to show, these animals, who knows, they may have been out there all this time, and we just didn't pay enough attention. We're also not, as Sri Lankans, we don't pay enough attention to our oceans. We have an incredible bounty out there. And so we need more people, we need more eyes on the water, we need more people to be excited and engaged and wanting to know and protect our oceans.
This is yet our first sighting. What can we do to safeguard them?
So, as Sri Lankans, one thing is, we need to be proud of the fact that we live in an incredible part of the world, and we need to start looking outwards beyond our shoreline. Life doesn't end at the shoreline, but we need to also ask our support projects and organizations that are pushing for conservation. My work, one of the pieces of work, like I said, one of the biggest things I do is try to figure out how we can stop whales from getting killed by ships. It's tricky, but we know it's a problem. So the more people know about these things, the more we can get our army of people together, and we can get a collective voice to ask for change. It's the same thing with the entanglement issues, with pollution. We have a lot of work to do, and it's about time we started.
Thank you, Dr. Asha de Vos, for joining us. We're hoping to see you again on our network very soon.
Sweet.